I'm Lindley Good and welcome to Market Force's webinar on the digital insurer, hosted in association with Guidewire. Now, the insurance sector stands on the threshold of transformation. Technological change is sweeping across every industry, including, but certainly not limited to, the Internet of Things and the sharing economy. And customer expectations are rising with every click. One set of customers is particularly dynamic. Millennials, if you choose to call them that. People like you and me standing at the cutting edge of the emerging possibilities of digital change. So having a strategy that genuinely engages with this growing segment of the population must be at the heart of every insurer's plans for the next decade and beyond. So over the next hour, we'll be investigating the potential created by new technologies, what this means for customer engagement in insurance, and how you can start to prepare for this gigantic shift. Let's meet the great panel who will be helping you to engage and excel in your next step as a digital insurer. First of all is Dan Robinson. Hello, Dan.
Hi, great to be here.
Good to see you. Dan is the Transformation Director for More Than Insurance, part of the RSA Group. At More Than, Dan's focus is on driving forward both the technology and the cultural transformation of the business, incorporating agile and lean approaches with a large dose of customer focus to drive an agenda of pace, accountability, and relentless test and learn. Good to see you today. Next up is Kerry Chilvers. Hello, Kerry.
Hi, Lindley.
Good to see you. Kerry has spent her career with Direct Line Group, where she has undertaken a variety of marketing roles. Her latest role is as Group Brands Director, responsible for brand strategy, marketing communications, and proposition development across Direct Line, Churchill, Green Flag, and Privilege brands. Now, Kerry's focused on bringing genuine differentiation to a crowded sector and is passionate about the role of brand and marketing in shaping organizational delivery and commercial performance too. Good to see you. Next is Ben Green. Hello, Ben.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you too. Ben is Digital Director at TOC and has been pushing the potential of digital and mobile innovation and the opportunities that exist within this area of consumer technology development for many years. He can draw on experience of launching mobile as a new channel for banking that has transformed that industry's customer relationships. He has recently turned his attention to the insurance industry as a burgeoning area of potential disruption and opportunity, and is now focused on transforming customer experience and digital interactions as an entrepreneur in the fintech space. Great to see you again, Ben. And last but not least, we have Mark Mullen. Hello, Mark.
Thank you, Lindley, and it's great to be here on such a nice day.
Great to have you here on this lovely day. Mark is Digital Strategy Director International at Guidewire. Now, Mark has over 30 years of experience in the insurance, financial services, and related industries, with a particular background in underwriting and broking, having started his career as a commercial underwriter at Royal Insurance, now RSA, specializing in complex commercial risks. Mark leads Guidewire's product strategy and customer engagement approach in EMEA, ANZ, and Southeast Asia. Great to see you, Mark. Thanks for joining us, and thanks very much to Guidewire for supporting our webinar today.
Great to be here.
Couldn't do it without you. Okay, so we have lots and lots to get through in the next hour, and we want to give you the opportunity, wherever you are, to put your questions and ideas to our panelists. If you're watching us live today, you can send them in throughout the webinar, either using the Twitter hashtag, which is digital17, or the question section right here on our webpage. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of the discussion. Get involved. We really want to see those fingers click and give us some ideas. Okay, so let's get started by talking about how customer expectations are changing and what it means for the insurance industry. First of all, to everybody, let's start with Ben. How do customers view insurance? Go.
I think that customers probably view insurance from a distance. It's quite a remote relationship, I think, for most consumers. Maybe once a year, I get tapped up by my insurer when it's time to remind me I owe them some money. Yeah. But really, the opportunity that exists for insurers to increase the frequency and the relevancy with which they can communicate with consumers, I think, is obvious to most people.
I suppose, Dan, most of the time, people don't view insurers. I mean, it's a pretty distant relationship, right?
Yeah, I think it is, and I think we in the industry have not helped by almost driving a commodity purchasing behaviour. But I think actually, first of all, it's different by product. So buying a car insurance product is very different emotionally to buying home insurance, protecting your house, your family. But also the moments of truth matter. So it might start as an experience buying, but ultimately our product is about helping people who've had bad things happen to them. And once people have been through that experience, I think actually they start to really understand what the product is. I think as insurers, we have to be clear about what that product is and actually be honest that it's not necessarily cool, but it is serious and really quite important. And we tend not to do that.
Kerry, what do you think? I mean, how do people view us right now? Particularly maybe younger people. We'll get into that in a second. But, you know, is it changing too?
I think how you view your insurer now very much partly depends on who you're insured with, but partly it depends how you feel when you approach insurance, and we're all quite different, and different people have different attitudes. I think, you know, there'll be many people out there who think that they've got good insurance, they've got, you know, a good product at a good price, and they value the product that they've got. You'll be others who believe it's just an obligation and they wish they didn't have to, and it's really expensive and they resent it. But I think the other thing that probably unites a lot of them is that we're typically not that easy to deal with, whether that's point of purchase or point of claim. And that's probably an overriding sentiment, particularly borne out when they compare us to other industries that they're used to dealing with. We're just a bit more hassle.
Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, it's you know, we've talked about distance, we've talked about commoditization, and it's a very distant relationship, not just because of the once a year interaction, but it's looked upon by many consumers anyways as a grudge purchase, and in the commercial space, which is a little bit different, it's starting to go that way. Getting value across to the end purchaser of the insurance when you don't have a need for the product tomorrow, that moment of truth, maybe 6-7 years from now, it's really hard. I don't envy the insurers trying to do that, but they have to get better at it.
We've been talking about grudge purchases for a long time. It kind of has been, it kind of was, that's kind of how it was defined by consumers maybe, but with younger people now having buying power, Ben, millennials are here, is that changing, or, you know, is the entire appetite for insurance, what the details are, how you buy it, what's happening now?
So millennials is a bit of a word for me, in as far as I think sometimes it can be ascribed to an age group, whereas probably it's more of an attitudinal segment. I have things in common with the millennial definition, despite being nowhere near born in the year 2000. Having said that, you know, what does that attitude do in terms of shifting and changing the perception of insurance? I think that, you know, one of the key traits of a millennial is being very on demand in the requirement that I have of the services which I wish to consume. And therefore, there is a great opportunity for insurance to become relevant more over time. So instead of it being a contract which I enter into for a 12-month period, are there opportunities through my use of digital to make that contract more flexible and therefore more reflective of what my risk profile might be during the course of the term, whatever that relationship is? So huge opportunity to meet the consumer expectation, but I think, you know, the big challenge as well from the insurer to move forward technically to enable that richness to develop.
I normally choke when I use the word millennials these days because it's so overused, and actually the danger is, with any term like that, is that it becomes a term and you don't really look inside on what that really means, and I think you've already, you know, really highlighted that. Everybody is different. An age group doesn't necessarily define how you act and react. So Kerry, you know, how can you start to view, I'm going to use it again, millennials differently in order to, yes, drive business, but also have a better relationship? How do you start to change that?
I think, first of all, you really need to get to understand who it is you're talking about. We've touched on it, millennials is quite a wide age range, from 16-year-olds about to sit their GCSEs to 35-year-olds. That's my brother. He's been married 5 years and has 2 kids. You know, there's a huge difference. So there might be a lot of attitude that's the same, actually. A lot of the circumstances the two ends of the spectrum find themselves in is very different. You know, and when I look at the younger end of millennials, they're in a very different space to that which I grew up in. You know, they're going to have, you know, much larger debt, less likely to own a home, less likely to own a car, likely to settle down and get married later. So their demand of insurance products and their lifestyle will dictate a different insurance need. So first and foremost, who is it you're talking about, and be quite tight on that definition and quite tight on that audience, and then really get to know them, really get to understand them.
So sort of, it's not just obviously, but it's not so much about how they view you in some ways, it's how you view them. If you get your view of the younger person or the different person or whatever age they are, the person with the younger attitudes, then you're starting to really make a difference. Kerry?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to walk in somebody else's shoes. You know, we've just recently launched an app targeted at 17 to 25-year-olds and particularly focused on 17 to 19-year-old males. It's a driving app, CSR initiative, and it's been fascinating to go through that and just realise, you know, it should be no surprise just how different they are to me or how I think they think. More importantly, you know, you go into research groups and, you know, you go in with proposals and actually their view is quite different. And it's been a real eye-opener, the value of really working and understanding that audience, really understanding your audience and what they do, not just in relation to your product, but also their wider life and what matters to them. Dan, we're going to get onto data and we're going to get onto insight later on to drive that. But key steps that you can take to change that approach now.
So I think just to build on Kerry's point, first of all, you've absolutely got to understand who you're targeting, what their needs are, and why. I think you've got to be ready to get it wrong. You've got to recognise that, focus groups can give you a good start, but actually the real experience of doing this in live, talking to real customers, is how you build the experience. So almost a concept of doing a piece of research to define a proposition and launch it, done, should not ever exist now. This is about getting out with early ideas, testing minimum viable products, and really learning by doing. And that's quite a challenge to do in an insurance world that's existed for the past 20 years, with legacy as being a term that's frankly hampered almost all of us. So there is a technology enablement bit, but first of all, you've got to be clear about what it is you want to do, and ultimately you need a team working on it and a culture that means that they can do that relentless test and learn and know that the job is never finished.
So strategy and making sure that people that understand the audience, whether or not they have it from data and insight through the company, but also through their own lifestyles, that is really, really fundamentally important, do you think? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, if you think traditionally about who makes the big decisions in a large composite insurance company, they're probably not millennials. And therefore, I think one of the big challenges is to make sure that the decision-making is happening at the right level, that it's based on real customer experience, and that actually there is a proper representation of customer types actually in the company making decisions, working on it. Because actually you need that kind of breadth to get the right thought processes and actions happening.
Before we went on, and we are live from London, hello, nice to see you there today. Mark, we were talking about you shop for, say, car insurance, and we'll go to you, Kerry, in a second, but you shop for car insurance and you see a list of names that you don't know. The landscape is changing. Kerry, competition is everywhere. How do you think the competition in the market is affecting, say, established insurers?
So we're seeing many new entrants come in with products targeted specifically at the millennial or younger end millennial audience, both in the UK and abroad, so whether that's Lemonade, Back Me Up, Trove, and they're very much targeted at a sort of emerging lifestyle, which is about sharing products, low home ownership, ensuring my most valuable possessions, my iPhone, my iMac, my bike, etc. I think what they're doing is really they're challenging insurers in that they're really delivering what customers want, which is, you've talked about on demand. I need it to work, and I need it to work fast. They've got great customer experience. They bring real speed. They're also challenging existing insurers because the speed at which they're able to bring these products to market and adapt those products based on the learnings they're getting through live usage is really challenging the traditional model with which we operate.
Are they good bedfellows? Are people like Airbnb, Facebook, the outside world that is working? Is that starting to influence the way insurance is working? I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time in many ways. Is change happening at a rate that it needs to?
It's certainly helping a business like mine. The use of things like Facebook or any of the social media platforms that are out there as a mechanism to facilitate this millennial demand for speed, fantastic customer experience, and to juxtapose that against the incumbents who have form after form after form to fill in when frankly I can just hit the sign in with Facebook and bang, it's more or less pre-populated for me. The amount of data that exists out there on me as a consumer, on my vehicle, on my property, on my lifestyle, that could be used as a willing expression by me, the consumer, to an underwriter to price my risk, it is astounding. And so for a new entrant like TOC to take advantage of that and then to test and to learn by direct feedback with a customer experience which we're in control of, and I don't have to go through layers and layers of an organisation to agree to change, it is a fantastic opportunity. So you're going to see a lot more competitors like us testing and learning and trialling and failing fast. I think the opportunity for the incumbents is potentially to partner with some of those to get those learnings more quickly, but nonetheless to find a mechanism by which they can internalise them into the structure of the company.
Mark, stripping down complexity from in insurance and also then partnering, these things are fundamentally important because a fresh wind has to blow through it.
Yeah, if you look at the traditional landscape of insurers, and it's not unique to the UK, this is a global problem. Bigger players with legacy, whether it's landscape of their technology landscape or it's their business landscape, have a lot of difficulty adapting to this business model, which is much more iterative, which, you know, try things, let them fail quickly and throw them away. The companies that you can partner with that can help are one way of achieving that. Another way of achieving that is just to decide that my legacy business platform, my legacy technology platform won't allow me to achieve this. So we'll spin off something separate, either as a new brand or the same brand, that is specifically targeted on that, learn about what our market's going to be and deliver that value. We've had a couple of customers that have done that extremely successfully, and we are being approached by a number of insurers now across the world who are looking to do exactly that same thing, because they've come to the conclusion that I can't do it the way I've been used to doing it. My attitudes are too ingrained in the way that I do things, so I need to do things differently. It takes a lot of, it's very bold, and it takes a lot of, to go ahead, right?
And it's quite scary because, you know, stepping outside yourself, and Kerry, in terms of the campaign you mentioned for younger male drivers, what's the value of doing something so different that you wouldn't even recognise that it was your campaign a few years ago? You know, is that effective? Just going, okay, that's how we normally do things, let's try this.
Yes, absolutely, and effective in a number of ways. First of all, it's, you know, 17 to 19-year-olds just behave very differently to me and to us. Their media consumption is hugely different. How they hear about new news and share news, it's very different. They don't consume traditional advertising messages in the way that the mass population do. It has to be, they hear about new things through their social media feeds and through their friends, so you have to engage with them in that way. And to do that, you need to do something quite different and quite disruptive. So if you want to have success with that audience, you need to do something quite differently. I think the other byproduct of it is that from internally in the organisation, actually gives you confidence that you need to do some brave things and do some things quite differently, and they work. So it has just a benefit both externally and internally.
So Dan, yeah, please.
Just build on that point a little bit. So, I mean, just in reference to startups and the competition they bring, competition has to be a good thing. It's driving us to take the right actions and meet needs of customers. But it always fascinates me that startups are largely people who've sprung out of more established insurance companies with a certain culture, partly because they get frustrated that they can't deliver the kind of change that they want to there. As someone from a larger insurer, actually, we kind of recognise that we're driving a cultural change in our business, but we recognise that you can't do all of that at once, and so actually we've had to separate out the more, I guess, future-looking work on connected home and telematics, and actually part of the role of that almost incubation setup is to protect that from the broader culture of the company. And one of my colleagues, Kenny Leach, talks about corporate antibodies, because if you don't protect against those corporate antibodies, the whole thing will be rejected. You get tissue rejection because actually the ideas are too new and the approaches are too different. But I think over time, actually, life gets more difficult for the startups because as corporates will get better at managing that process. So the new ideas will start to come more from us, necessarily then from startups.
Important to have an immune system, but that can keep you back. Let's just talk social media. Let's talk distribution for just a second. We have a couple of minutes. Dan, after your sip of water, social media. You know, how important? We all know the value of social media. We know the data that it can bring if you harness it correctly and you look at the right things and you don't cherry pick. But how important do you think this, you know, social media is going to be, and that insight that you get from, you know, the soft information?
So I don't think it's going to be. I think it already is. I think it's all pervasive. You know, Facebook is a great example. I mean, I've often heard Facebook as Facebook for 40s. I think we kind of over-focus on that sometimes. There's lots of newer stuff that the younger guys are doing that, frankly, I probably don't understand. But it's there, and it's there to stay. It breaks down barriers. So consumers expect to be able to get directly to their insurer when there's a problem. And traditionally, we might have done that kind of work on the side of our desks. It's not had the focus that maybe the phone channel has. That can't happen anymore. I think that the other thing is there's an expectation of responsiveness that we're not used to. You know, I expect a response to something I'm posted on social media in minutes I can tolerate. But if you get into hours, I'm really not impressed. Traditionally, insurers have put emails into queues that are worked over 24, 48 hours, and they started originally putting media posts into that same process. It just doesn't work. So it's a whole new way of thinking and a level of responsiveness that we're just not used to.
Speed is there again. Speed is absolutely fundamental to all of the change that's ahead. But Mark, in terms of distribution, speed is also very important. But how do you think distribution will change? When we were chatting before we came on today, I was talking about let me find the word. Oh yeah, portals.
Oh well, yeah, that word. Yeah, the role of portals is an interesting one. But if you look at distribution. We talked about this earlier, that the single biggest differentiator between markets around the world is the way that insurance is distributed. There are things that we do here that we take for granted that are illegal in other markets. But the fact of the matter is that innovating the way you distribute and being willing to throw away that distribution channel that isn't working for you is potentially one of the most important parts of the way an insurer is going to strategize over the next few years. Being willing to partner with new distribution and being able to throw that away quickly if it doesn't work is also very important. And this is the biggest factor we see in talking to insurers is that ability to change and change quickly. We look at the way the digital landscape or the customer engagement landscape has changed in the last, say, 3 years. It's nightmarish the speed at which it's moving, but it's not slowing down. I'd point to Germany as the biggest example in Europe of an economy from an insurance perspective that has changed essentially overnight. And is rapidly going to catch up to the UK and potentially pass us without the impacts of our distribution handcuffs that we have in motor insurance.
I think that there's also there's a kind of a touch point between the consumer trends that you see exhibited through social media or through people's interaction with the technology, and then how to use a kind of a distribution method that then is much more self-service. So I was struck by something I saw the other day whereby you can do pet insurance by taking a photo of your cat. And you can do that because the photo of Booty, my cat, there are so many pictures of cats like that on Google that the Google software development kit will actually resolve you down to the species and breed of cat. Yeah. Now, that's cool because then you can distribute something very much at point of awareness or point of need without the need of an intermediary. So I can now more or less go direct simply by snapping photos of things where a canon of data exists behind it. That's another twist on the distribution model, which is much more to the millennial point of need and on demand, which, again, I'm not quite sure I see being exploited just yet, but there's a consumer trend there to be played upon.
AI will start to step in, and machine learning and so on, and cognitive, but for the moment, comparison, quantitative analysis is going to be important. The length of that cat's hair is really important. So is realistically, looking to the future, is there anything that you can tell us about the way customer relationship will look in a few years' time? Will tech step in? Anyone have an idea of, does anyone have a crystal ball on them that they can look into and say, okay, customer relationship will be X, even in a year's time? Dan, what do you think?
So I think it's a dangerous game to play, to be honest. So I think we're probably quite good at predicting what might happen in the next couple of years. We tend to overestimate how different that's going to be. But in a longer time frame, looking out 5 years, 10 years, actually dramatically different, and we can't predict what that's going to be. So we have to build responsive organizations that can test and learn all the way through that and never stop developing. I think the other thing is that because we don't know, we have to start taking decisions based on different criteria that we're used to. So a 5-year benefits case for a proposition that we haven't yet tested in the market can't ever make sense because you just don't know. So for me, crystal ball gazing is a little bit fruitless. But if you want to do it, take a look at mobile phone development. For me, that's the best benchmark of how you can, how things can change. You go from Nokia being the leader to gone. It's a bit fruitless.
So not necessarily what you do, but how you do it will be the way to respond to whatever changes come in a year's time. Look forward to that. Look forward to that. So look, we know that customers want or will want much more, much different from their insurers as they do now. Let's now talk about how new technologies can meet these rising expectations. First of all, back to you, Dan. Internet of Things. What does that mean? We've already touched on it. It is already the dominant force. Internet of Things. How will that start to be used, categorized, maybe in ways that it isn't being used right now?
So I think, first of all, it provides a great opportunity for insurers to start to do what I think they really should do, and that's to prevent bad things happening rather than trying to deal with them afterwards. So from a home insurance perspective, clearly great opportunities with leak detection, smoke detection, that kind of stuff. But all of that technology does risk being a little bit sexy and shiny. We've got to look beyond that and get to what's really going to help the customers. And ultimately, I think in home insurance, customers want reassurance. I personally want to know that my home and my family are protected. So finding ways to use technology to do that and link it to the insurance proposition, I think, is a fantastic opportunity.
Mark, we haven't really talked about the S word, strategy, yet. How does the Internet of Things, which is kind of our life, start to influence strategy?
Yeah, theoretically, the application of the Internet of Things and the availability of huge amounts of data, but we don't know what to do with it yet, is an anathema to having a strategy to how to deal with it. I like to think in terms of a framework so that we can adapt to the things we haven't even thought of yet. Because 2-3 years ago, when Internet of Things became a big word, we had no idea what it was going to impact. It's impacted things like supply chain management, which we never thought was going to happen the way that it has. It's impacted the use of certain devices that we never thought that it would impact. So I don't really have an answer other than have a good way of reacting to it beyond trying to think of what your strategy would be. Even 2 years from now is too far down the line. I don't think we can even work that far ahead.
But from this point on, Ben, opportunities are abound, potentially. How do you start to use those, to bring those into the business? And I think we're starting off with understanding your customer, really, really spending your time and your motivation on getting to know the people you serve.
Yeah, and the customer need as well, I think, is the first stepping stone. So IoT is sexy and shiny, but as a consumer, do I really understand what the benefit of bringing these devices into my home is all about? And if I'm not an early adopter, the answer is probably no. So in order to generate the data in the first instance, there has to be some compelling proposition which draws me into fitting smart lights and smart thermostats and smart XYZ in the home as an example. I do think, though, that insurers have a massive part to play in that, because you can suddenly make it more relevant to me as a customer, both on a preventative basis and on a cost advantage basis, to say, for example, that lazy Ben, who never sets his burglar alarm, traipses off down to the tube station, but my phone buzzes and says, actually, you might want to do this right now. Ah, yes, good for insurer, good for me, bad for the burglar. But that is a real nice proof point then for why IoT starts to be of benefit. I think from those small steps will come bigger leaps and greater knowledge, greater awareness from a data point of view and a behavioural point of view as well.
Kerry, we're just backing up slightly on this customer experience conversation is had in many places. Achieving it is one thing, but in terms of data, we're moving back to regulation, moving back to data. Who owns it?
Very interesting and very timely question with the upcoming GDPR legislation. But I think, ultimately, whether it's a legislation or a philosophical question, it's the customer, it's my data. And I think it's customer consent that will prevail, even if that's not in a sort of regulatory context. And the thing to remember is customers are happy to give us their data if they think they can if there's value in it, if they see a clear value exchange. And I think you're talking there, your smart burglar alarm that alerts you when you've not. I'm happy to give you my data. I'm happy to let you know when I'm X distance away from my house if I believe there's value in me doing that. And I think that's the part that we need to hold on to, is if I want to use customers' data, what value are they getting back in return?
Let's talk about, get back to competition for a second. For instance, if a manufacturer of driverless cars came into the market, and as they are, and started to encroach on the insurance space, do you think that's likely? Do you think that's a real threat to established insurers, or is there a chance to partner here to really work with people, not only the customers but with the people you work with, to make a much better service, a much better new reactive set of products that changes over time?
Well, first of all, driverless cars are here in some description, or autonomous vehicles, and you'll see a kind of move to more autonomy over time. So absolutely, in 10 years plus, they will have changed the kind of role of a traditional car insurer. That's a kind of given. I think the next point is that while there's still a liability when a road traffic accident happens, is it the car's fault? Is it the driver? Whilst cars still have an element of driver control, there's absolutely still need for insurance and for an insurance company. And I think even if manufacturers step into the space of protecting and insuring some of the metal, I think the other role of insurance companies goes beyond that, from a third-party liability, injury to pedestrians, injury to driver, injury to passengers, and that's a very different kind of risk that's still likely to sit with traditional insurance companies. But I think the big thing is as well is that we've got an obligation to get involved, and we've got a responsibility to get involved. Driverless cars are a good thing because ultimately it will mean an improvement in road safety and less road traffic accidents. So I think, you know, as an insurance company, we absolutely are involved in those conversations to help get driverless cars on the road, because that's good for everybody.
Good luck when your 17 to 25-year-old young man, as I was many years ago, wants to rip out that steering wheel and have their own in so they can drive the car again. That's always the risk, isn't it? The sharing economy, Dan, is clearly, you know, clearly that is a really exciting area. What influence will that have in terms of how insurers do their business then?
So again, I think it's probably difficult to predict that, but I think the sharing economy, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's car sharing, it just presents another unmet need from a customer perspective. So if you take the Airbnb example, actually, I might want as a homeowner to rent out a room through Airbnb. I wouldn't be covered on the traditional insurance policy to do that, but as that becomes more common, it kind of really should be, or it certainly should be clear whether it is or not. So for me, whatever the technology development, it's just opening up new needs from a consumer perspective, and it's our job to face into them. But I think flexibility is going to be the key. Whichever route these things go, we have to be more flexible as insurers, and we have to be responsive to what the customers want.
Do you know what? As a customer, and this is true of people I've dealt with on Airbnb and so on and so forth, is actually, if I'm running a business, some small business with my own personal property involved, then actually I'm likely to be more engaged with my insurer. I'm kind of thinking, oh, well, actually, there's not only an advantage to me, a benefit, as Kerry said earlier on, but also a value, but also I really want to protect myself. It's engagement. How can we offer more in the sharing economy? Is it communication, for example?
It's communication and expertise and the ability to communicate that. And you know, going back to the point around driverless cars as well, you know, what insurers can do that the car manufacturers cannot do, at least not today, is deliver value at the point of that moment of need, particularly if there's an injury involved. Our industry's got the expertise on how to address that and how to help that person feel better about what's happened. You know, Volvo, or whoever the manufacturer of the car is not going to be able to do that as effectively. That's where we add value to the chain, and it's all about adding value and be able to do it quickly. Responsiveness, I've harped on this a number of times, responsiveness of our industry has not traditionally been its biggest selling point. That has to change. 6 months to deliver a product innovation is going to be too long. 2 years to deliver a customer experience platform is too long. But that kind of agility comes at a price.
Just on the motor manufacturer front of it, I think we shouldn't forget that actually insurers and motor manufacturers have been working pretty closely together on propositions for a very long time. What we have to do is evolve those relationships to cater for these new needs. But I think as Kerry said, there's always going to be a need for insurance, because actually most of the time we're not talking about bent metal, we're talking about personal injury. And some pretty horrific, lifelong changes that people experience. They might argue that they will reduce, but they're still going to be there because there's always going to be a human factor in this. So I think it's about how we work together across the insurance industry with motor manufacturers and with consumers to get it right.
And practically the balance that I know we've talked about, which is the balance between the automation and the ability to use the data that's coming in if you want to use it, and that human touch. That's going to be so important to get right later on. You know, refocusing your investment, which is not an easy sell. People are expensive, but actually they're very beneficial as well to customers. Ben?
There's a huge amount of expertise that exists within the insurance industry, which as a consumer I'm unaware of. I'm relatively new to the industry still. And it's amazing to me that if I do any works on my property, for example, my home insurance potentially is invalid for the period of time that work's going on. Well, that's kind of new news. And so as a direct consequence then, that expertise from a body of human capital knowledge can be expressed to me as a consumer in a really nice value add that says, actually, just scan the planning applications that are going on in my borough of London. When you see that postcode that's already on cover have a planning application approved, phone me, reach out to me, email me, text me. What an amazing moment to be able to have a human with real knowledge come out and explain to me that I'm about to find myself in quite hot water and solve the problem for me as well by giving me a tiny little policy add-on. I mean, that is a thing which digital can be part of, but the actual fulfillment, that kind of last 5 yards of the process, has so much benefit from a human connection.
At the right time.
Yeah, at the right time, and you're fusing both together there, I think, in that example.
And Kerry, you know, when this relationship is really working in the future, what sort of feedback? How can you see that ongoing relationship looking? Is it going to be a little chat with Ben? You know, he's called you up. There's something happened with his speedboat, and he wants to have a chat with you. You know, what does a really healthy ongoing relationship look like, you think?
A bit like much of the conversation, it's very difficult to predict, and it depends what sort of time frame you're talking about. But I think we will need to be able to deal with customers through a variety of channels, and I think that's true today and will become increasingly true going forward. People kind of want to deal with you, how they want to deal with you, when they want to deal with you, and that's what great customer service will look like. That if I'm really up against it and I really just want to talk to somebody because I need that extra reassurance, then you probably need to have somebody available on the end of the phone. But quite often I might be happy to do that through Messenger and chat to you, and that'd be really comfortable that that's an AI chatbot. It might still sound like a person, it's not to go formal, but we're just going to have to be open to all of that.
Okay, so we have discussed customer expectations, how technologies can open the door for insurers. Now let's look at how they can help you to gain the edge over your competitors. It comes back to competition in the end, doesn't it? Well, how ready do you think insurers are currently for the scale of technological change? Mark, where are we?
That's all over the map. I think insurers have reacted better of late, but still very hesitant to move quickly enough to have the right infrastructure from a business or a technology perspective. It's the dynamic of this is changing far too quickly. However, you know, we've seen some very promising signs, both in the UK and around the world, with insurers getting to grips with this and making bold decisions, which is, you know, it's a huge change in the last, say, 18 to 24 months. It's still got a long way to go, though, because we work to different dynamics than many of the industries that we're compared to. And we're talking about the human interaction and the omni-channel approach. This is something that we're often compared to Amazon as an entity that drives expectation. But you know, there's a very good example of a company that dissuades you from one channel, and that's talking to them, right? We have to work differently, and that moment of truth, that ability to deliver the right communication channel at the right point in time, and not knowing what that is really, really hard.
We're coming up to the time almost where we will hear from you. If you have a question for us, they're coming through now. Be part of the conversation. Give us your thoughts, your ideas, and particularly your questions, because we can answer them live if you're watching us here today. If you're watching us on demand, I hope whatever comes up is very useful to you later on. But mixing the technology and the readiness for that with the cultural shift, Ben, you know, we've already talked about how important it is to have the right people within your organisation available, coming up with ideas for you, fail fast and move on. This is not only true of insurance. It's certainly been true of banking and other areas before now. So that cultural shift, is that going to define the success of insurance in the future, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure it will. And you know, these are large organisations with very long tenures in their market. They are by their nature risk averse, albeit good at playing with risk as well. But therefore, getting them to shift is extremely difficult. And one of the things that we've observed as a new entrant coming into the market just in the coming weeks is that we've been very much welcomed by our underwriting partners, because I think our underwriting partners have seen that there is an opportunity to use us as something of a bridgehead. They can use us as exemplars within the organisation and learn a few things, but very much they are very, very clear that they are wishing to internalise that. And I think that's a good strategy to begin with. Dan's already made the point around his organisation and trying to find the firebrands within it who can be protected from the allergic reaction the organisation will have as they can rock the boat. But a blend of doing that internally and bringing it in from the outside, I'm sure, is the right first step. And from that will flourish all sorts of opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the most important thing is whatever your strategy is, you've got to have one. Now, you might choose to be investing directly in startups, or you might have an active stand back, watch, and then engage at a later point strategy. As long as you're clear about what you're doing, I think all can work. And actually, now I say we've had a mix of both. But to not have a strategy, that's the biggest sin. And I completely agree. Actually, I think telematics is a great example. That, you know, for the past few years has been the big shining light of we've done something new and different and innovative. And there are very few examples that I can think of where that has been done without the help from an external party who's more innovative, forward-thinking, and focused on that technology.
A strategy or even a framework with which it's work. What are the weakest links in the value chain, if you like, in order to get innovation right? And where are the big stumbling blocks apart from culture, the value chain that perhaps can be improved? Parts of that. Maybe it is the strategy. Maybe it's the understanding of customers. There are so many things. We probably covered them in some ways, but key things to change right now.
One of the observations which I've made from my time in banking was giving up too early. So the conversation around continuing to iterate and the dreaded 5-year business case, it's a real killer. Being able to set yourself up as an organisation to have a ring-fenced pot of money which can be spent on an iterative basis with some clear objectives. Don't get me wrong, you want to put KPIs over it, but trying to say that you're guaranteeing a return against this particular kind of value statement for 3-5 years, it's very, very hard, because inevitably what happens is you set lots of things running and all of them need to pivot, but they're pegged back to a business case that gave them very clear strategic focus to begin with. So you see that happening in organisations now, whether they're starting to learn those lessons. I think that just continue to persist and fail fast and safe mantra is a big one that you see organisations struggling to overcome.
You also mentioned, Kerry, branding, marketing, the communication side of it is really, really important, and perhaps that hasn't been emphasised before now. I mean, you're an advocate of that, obviously. So, reaching out and talking to customers and listening to customers and future customers, how important is that?
I mean, that's marketing 101 and has been for decades and will continue to be. So it's just how you do it that's slightly different. It is absolutely, back to our point almost at the start of the conversation, is really understand your customers. Really, what do they want? How can you meet their needs better than anybody else?
Can you really come up with brand new ideas, new ways of working? Just by, say, in a conventional way, listening to customers? Or is it, it needs to be, obviously, the culture of the organisation, the way the organisation works needs to really come together so you can see all the route all the way through?
Yes, to my point, the way you do it might be different. So it might not be that I do traditional research groups or that I look at traditional demographic profiles, but ultimately it's about how do I best understand consumers. And sometimes that's through prototyping, it's getting people to play with live demos, etc., to understand what works and what doesn't work, to watch them live. But ultimately, that's still understanding what do I want, how do I use it, how can I improve on it, how do I make sure the organisation delivers on that, and then how do I make sure that consumers know about that and can communicate that in a way that's really relevant and engaging for them. That's sort of the backbone of marketing for the last 100 years, and it's kind of now, whether that be that I now just take it to them differently, I take it to them through social channels, I build beta peer groups that are testing beta versions of my products. But ultimately, it's all about understanding really what's going to stick with consumers.
A good example of that is cyber insurance. So you see corporate cyber insurance as something which is becoming more mature, but it's very, very rare to find it for people. And yet the consumer trend, to go back to the observation of human beings out there, is goodness only knows how many kind of laptops, tablets, IoT devices, all sorts of things I have in my personal life, and then that's for my children as well. So that's quite a sensible innovation if you look at it from that point of view, to just take an existing cyber structure for companies and apply it to people. And that's a great example potentially of an unmet need, but one which is relatively easy to leverage from a structural point of view.
Let alone taking a memory stick and plugging it into your work computer and then all hell breaks loose.
Turn off the USB slot, you're fine.
Good, yes, that's a good idea. Good strategy, that's strategy 101. But Mark, innovation is fundamentally important. Anything else that, from your work with your clients you can bring in that you said, well, actually, try this. They've said, we want to try that, and it's actually started to work.
Kerry referred to it briefly earlier, was having the right people involved and getting the bright stars involved, and having, if you're working on a millennial targeted product, actually have millennials working on it. That's a little bit of an issue for us as an industry, because attracting people to work in our industry is well, if I talk to my son and I say to him, are you interested in going to work for an insurer because he's looking for a job right now, the first word out of his mouth is no. And the reason is because of his perception of the industry. We need to change the perception of the industry for some of these individuals. But you look at other insurers, I won't name them out loud, but there's a couple of insurers who have done things like forming digital garages. Now, you can say there's good and bad things about that, but what they've done is attracted some amazing talent with some hugely brilliant ideas, and they're able to do things much more quickly. Not everybody can invest in something like that, but maybe there's a way of ensuring that investment across your partner base and across your cohort base and across your entities around the world which is what a couple of those insurers have been able to do as well.
And of course, younger people in particular, not necessarily millennials, but younger people will perhaps choose to work with a company they associate with, they want to try things out with. That is initially the Google model. Many other people are trying it now. Time to experiment, time to come up with ideas. When my ideas are valued, and actually I share the value in my ideas, then you start to do things. Then they start to do things for you. That's important. And pairing with fintechs, working with younger people, and practically getting ideas through, that's got to be a way forward.
I think absolutely right. And I think just to your point on the cost of doing some of these big initiatives, they don't have to be big initiatives. That's right. That's a pretty corporate view. I actually think the best thing starts small and grow. But I think we do, as insurers, have to address some of our internal cultures. We have to protect that stuff from those antibodies. As a great example, if you walk into many of the offices in London, there's still that attitude that actually it's smart suit and it's tie and it's polished shoes. Now, if you're trying to attract young, digital, forward-thinking people into a company, chances are they're not going to really appreciate that kind of stifling attitude. So you've got to address that, but you can't just change their perception of that. You have to actually change the company. So if we really want to be moving from traditional insurers to truly digital-first companies, we've got to change some of the basics that have underpinned our thinking.
Kerry, in terms of differentiation, before we go to audience questions, how can you start to differentiate? I think we've come up with a few ideas today. You just talked about it. We've all talked about it, which is coming up with something new, something different, something quite shocking to the industry, to the company. But differentiating. What is the secret? If it's too secret, don't let us know.
Well, first of all, you sound like a stuck record, but really understand who it is that you want and understand them better than anybody else, because then you can better understand how to meet their needs. Then deliver on it brilliantly and make sure you communicate it brilliantly. There isn't a real rocket science. It's about being brave enough to really properly follow it through, which talks to engaging and involving your millennials to help you create it. We've got a grad programme within the Direct Line Group, and we've used them in as we've gone through this new initiative Shotgun. They're much closer to the target market, so why wouldn't we want those guys to be the guys that are helping shape what it is we do in the end? But also be brave enough to call out your board and your exco about it, and give them some real, it's evidence-based. It's, we're not making it up, but give them some real clear evidence about why we need to do something bold and different and brave. And I think that's going to be the key to it.
And evidence is really important. Mark, to prove that you've valued ideas, you've differentiated yourself to customers, that the entire process, the people within your company have a value, have a real reason to work there. Change can be made. I mean, this is all happening right now, but it can speed up with a new culture.
It will speed up.
It will speed up.
It will speed up. Every aspect of this, whether it's technical, whether it's business, we have seen change in speed, and it's only going in one direction. There's a danger that you might go a bit too far on any one of these things, but you can't be afraid of that. And we're going to try and get the influence of the millennials or younger people in this process. And yes, they're not the decision makers today, but they will be the decision makers 10 years from now. And that culture will permeate through the organizations that choose to make it work that way. They won't all be successful, but we're seeing that level of success and that rapidity of success accelerating very, very quickly.
Okay, well, we have covered lots of details so far, and we hope that you found the thoughts, the ideas from our panel helpful so far. Now it's your turn. You might be watching us from a long way from our studio here in London on a very sunny day. So now it's time for you to share your comments and your experiences with us for the last 12 minutes. Before we do, I'd like to just draw your attention to our old school but very valuable feedback form that you'll be seeing on your screen very shortly. We'd love for you to fill that out and tell us what you thought of today's webinars. It's really important to us that we can feed that back into our system and our people. So we've been asking you to send in your questions and your comments, both here on the webpage, also through Twitter using the hashtag, which is digital17. You can still do that. Get in touch. Let's have a look at them so far and get our panelists' thoughts and ideas. First of all, thanks to Richard, to my screen here. Richard Cockbain, a Senior Compliance Manager at Aviva. Thank you very much for writing to us today. Question to the panel. Who will answer it first? Are customers ready for transacting insurance using innovative digital design? Are customers ready? Well, Some will be, some won't be. Sorry to answer that really quickly, but let's, okay. So who fancies that first of all? Ben, yeah.
I guess typically three things have to be present for anything to be a success, right? So first of all, consumers have to be ready. The technology has to be readily available and cheap and affordable, and we have to have figured out how to make money out of it as well. So if those three things can kind of come together, then you have the recipe for something to be successful. So, you know, insurers have been making money out of insurance for a long time. The technology absolutely is nicely available, and I think what you're starting to see are evidence points of consumers embracing it. So my focus is on home and contents insurance. You see things like Nest and Hive, Lightwave RF. All of these products now are out there with consumers actively playing and curating and figuring out how they're going to function. So there are plenty of evidence points that suggest yes. Are all of those three parts of the recipe fully kind of overlapping and interlinking yet? Probably not. But it won't be long. So I think to Richard's question, you can probably find evidence of all parts of the recipe coming together, and it won't be long until that's fully formed.
It's early stages. Dan, yeah.
Yeah, so my view on this is you won't know until you try. And you've got to keep trying, because what works one year might not carry on working. Similarly, what doesn't work will. So you've got to keep testing and learning. And actually, I'm kind of a big believer in actually customers don't really necessarily know what they want if it's the next big step. No one knew they needed an iPad, and now look at tablets. So unless you're out there trying and never giving up, you kind of will never know.
A quote a few years ago, which is probably still timely, nobody really wakes up looking for a new insurance deal. You don't wake up excited about the insurance you're going to buy today. But actually, the appetite is there for my life when you leave the house, for the house to remind you that you haven't put the burglar alarm on. There is an appetite for that. There are so many, infinite number of small appetites that insurance potentially could take part in.
It's connecting up the value chain that makes that relevant, which is something we've never had to do before. But we can do that, and we need to be able to do it quickly. And delivering that now, not a year from now or 2 years from now, because that's going to be too late, because it will have changed. And the question is about digital design in particular. You know, we get involved in discussions with customers around digital design, which is what faces the end user of the portal or whatever it is, the persona. And most of them are the outliers are saying, well, maybe it'll last 2 years. But in actual fact, it's probably going to be a lot less than that. It's being able to adapt that design and then integrate it into the way that your business operates. That's what you need to be able to do, and be able to do that quickly. It's amazing how many insurers just aren't ready to do that yet, though.
And if it's delivering on what customers want, then absolutely they're ready for it. You know, it's particularly when you think about millennials, they want it to be on demand. They want great customer. They don't want the experience, they want the outcome, and I want the outcome fast. If I'm on to transact, if I'm on to make a change, if I'm on to make a claim, I just want to do that, and I want to do it quickly. So as long as that's what the design allows me to do, then that's absolutely perfect, and I'm ready for it.
And you know what? During a policy, the ability to change, to be updated, to interact with your policy. You know, often if it's closed down to you, you will not get involved. You will not act. You know, more. You won't become more close to the supplier, whatever the product is. So, being able to be flexible from my point of view as a customer as well, that would be really, really important. I would choose to then, and then I'd get involved. More questions to my screen here from Rudy Straub, who does innovation and omni-channel strategy at AXA. You do that. Fantastic. Good to hear from you today. Question, what about the impact of blockchain technology on insurance? It's the B word, blockchain. Now, in many people's eyes, fantastic, potentially fantastic. But anyone have a thought about blockchain? Dan, can I dare to ask you?
So I genuinely don't know the answer to that question. I think we're starting to dabble with it, but I think the reality is it's one of those things that we haven't yet worked out what problem it's solving in insurance. I think it has the potential to solve many problems, but I think we're, as an industry, some way off really getting to grips with it. I think, you know, if I cast my mind back over the past few years, the previous conversation was about big data. I think there are still plenty of us wrestling with moving from small data to big data before we get onto AI and machine learning and blockchain. So I think there are lots of opportunities. I don't know what they are yet.
It was a difficult one to answer, but I appreciate that very much, because it's the name may change, the form may change, but the principle within a sharing economy or thereabouts could be startlingly useful from the customer's point of view and also from the insurer's point of view, potentially. Now, Joshua Kell, hello, new products development underwriter at GS Insurance. Good to hear from you today. How can millennials working in larger insurance companies challenge existing legacy processes with new ideas? Well, we're right down to culture and how management deals with the ideas, whether it's closed down, whether it's allowed to go through, whether it actually represents a product at the end of the day. You've been around, this industry for a while.
No.
No. It's just no.
Yeah. It's well, I do remember when I was that young. It was a while back, and creating credibility to challenge is not an easy equation. It never has been. But the ability to link up with the right people within your organization and try something new on the side is not a bad thing. Organizations that actually encourage that will be very nice to see. If you look at the way that Google operates, for example, within their industry, there's a certain amount of time set aside for every employee to do little projects on the side to invent new things. That's where most of Google's innovation actually comes from. I'd like to see more insurers take that attitude towards things, but big challenge working in a large insurer to achieve that.
I think there's lots of facets to it. It talks to widespread cultural change, but it also talks to mechanisms that make it, make it easier and make it permissible. So we've got an ideas lab process. It is open to everybody. You submit your ideas, and we get hundreds every month. But that's a way of saying, I had an idea, and it might not be because I find it hard to challenge. It might just be because I don't know who to talk to, but it's a mechanism that's allowing people throughout the organisation to share ideas about how they can make it better for customers, how they can make us more efficient, etc. Those all go to a panel who explore them, look at viability and feedback straight to the employee that recommended it. If the cost savings, they get a share of it. If there's a benefit, they get a share of it. So it's those types of things that can start to drive some of the culture change and give you some real case studies and make some people heroes for doing it too. That makes it more permissible for people to keep doing it.
And it's a mindset change. It's a management change. It's the way that that people who perhaps don't have the status but do have ideas, even if they're fresh and new to the industry, can see a real result from what they think, whether or not it is really viable. One final question. Jose Martin, thank you very much, Innovation Director at Sanitas. Hello, good to see you. Will millennials behave in the same way worldwide? Now, the answer was no, but Mark, tell us about that.
Well, I would no, I hope not. Because no other age group behaves homogeneously worldwide either. So maybe some of their habits or their attitudes will be similar, but their behaviors will not. Certainly hope that the behaviors of millennials in the UK are different than what we saw reported for the United States this week, which I won't repeat.
One of the really interesting themes that's come through already is you'll never know unless you're out there trying to experience them. The behavioural feedback that comes can only come from participating in that landscape. And so whilst one would hope not, well, get out there and find out that really it is not, and that's why, and that's why, and that's why in these various different territories.
Back to understanding your customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Dan, final thought on this. There is so much that we talked about today. How much progress needs to be made right now? How much progress is being made?
So the simple answer to that is more. We're moving. We're not moving quickly enough. I think our customers are moving more quickly than we are. We are getting behind. I think we're taking sporadic leaps forward with different initiatives. Well, we need to do more. And I think we will forever need to do more. That's the difficult message. This never stops. So get out there and do it.
At least we'll have a job tomorrow. And Mark, after 30 years, I mean, there is so much exciting work to be done.
Absolutely.
But it is being done.
It is being done, and the reactive nature of the industry is encouragingly moving in the right direction. We've seen a tremendous change in the last 18 months, and it's great to see. It's exciting to see, even after 30 years, that our industry can move in new and exciting ways. It's great fun as well.
Fantastic. Well, I do hope you've enjoyed our exploration of customer engagement and digital innovation and how insurers can get ready to take advantage of the many exciting new possibilities we've spoken about. The industry is only going to get more competitive as new entrants come in and customer expectations rise. So it's vital that everybody makes sure that they can have a customer-focused, digital strategy or framework in place right now. Well, hopefully today's webinar has given you a range of insights and ideas to prepare for the challenge that faces you. There'll be a number of obstacles along the way, of course, but we're now at a moment of enormous opportunity. For now, it's time to close. If you haven't already, please do fill in the feedback form. A big thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their expertise. Kerry, Dan, Ben and Mark, it's been great to have you with us today. And of course, thanks to Guidewire for supporting our webinar. And from the Market Force team here at TrickBox Studios, we very much hope you'll be able to join us again at one of our future events. You can find out much more about all of our webinars and events on our website, marketforce.eu.com, or by following us on Twitter at @MF_ints. Last but not least, thank you very much for watching. You're sending in your comments and your ideas and your questions to us. We hope to see you next time. Until then, all the best. Take care.